briefly, and I'll mention a few things on, you can find every single thing that's on here on the internet. And so, but, you know, in the long term, paying for med school comes down to, you're just going to have to go to med school and pay for it. Don't let the debt scare you. And so there's ways to do it. You're going to make enough money when you get out that paying for it, yeah, maybe for 6, 7, 10 years or so, might be a little bit burdensome, and you could use a couple $1,000s a month to do other things with, but you'll get it paid off. And so don't let, there's different programs, we'll talk about some of those. There's things that they have for you guys that you're going to be fine. So don't let the debt part of things scare you away from, don't let it scare you away from med school. And so, but before we even get to paying off med school debt, the first 2 pages are on fee assistance programs, basically something you can do now if you qualify for it, the things you can do now to start taking care of some of that debt. So the first one, the front and back of the first page, or so page 1 and 2, I numbered them all at the bottom. Page 1 and 2 is the fee assistance program through the AAMC. Page 3 is the application fee waiver for ACOM, the DO schools version of a fee waiver. Alright, so the AAMC one, it covers part of your MCAT cost, not all of it, you still have to pay some, but it covers some of that cost, and it covers your application, the entire application fee for your MCAS application, and your secondary application fees up to a certain number of schools. That number changes from year to year most times. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. It's not retroactive, and so you can't sign up for the MCAT, pay for the MCAT, then apply to this program, get awarded it, and go back and let them to cover your MCAT costs. That's not going to happen. You can't apply to med school and pay the fee and then hear back from the program and they say, okay, you're accepted to the fee assistance program. They're not going to go back and cover any of your application costs. Now, when you apply, it's valid only for the calendar year that you applied for it in. And so if you apply now, you get awarded it now, it's only good until December 31st, 2014. If you want to apply again in January, you can. Now, so that's one thing you have to keep in mind. In terms of, and so you're probably going to have to apply for it twice. In terms of the MCAT itself, yeah, you want to take the MCAT by the end of May, your application year. And so for those of you looking at 2015 application, you want to take the MCAT by the end of May 2015. But when do you have to sign up and pay for the MCAT?
January.
Earlier than that.
It was October.
Right, mid-October of 2014. All right, so if you're thinking fee assistance for a 2015 MCAT, you need to do the fee assistance program now, because you're going to have to do all that stuff in 2014. Now, that ends December 31st, 2014. You don't apply until June of 2015, so then you're going to have to go back and apply again. Now, in some cases, they'll roll it over. In some cases, they'll tell you to apply again. It just depends on exactly what you qualify for. But do keep that in mind. Now, especially with the fee assistance program through AAMC, you do have to, regardless if you're married, regardless of how old you are, regardless of how long you've been out on your own, you have to include your parents' information. And even if they don't contribute anything, they're still going to take your parents' contribution or your parents' income tax stuff into account. And so that's the bad part about it. With the ACOM or the DO side of things, they don't cover your MCAT exam because MCAT is administered through the AAMC. And theirs isn't as good. Anytime you can have fees waived, it's okay. Theirs isn't as good as AAMC's. Theirs too is not retrospective, but they allow you to waive the application fees for up to 3 DO schools that you apply to. And a lot of the schools will, if you qualify through ACOM for the fee waiver, a lot of the schools will also waive your secondary application fees as well. So you get more going the AAMC route than you do the ACOM route. But again, if you do both, it's going to add up a little bit. Now, but if you're thinking the expensive part of applying to med school, it's not the application part and the MCAT part. The expensive part is what?
Flying.
Right, interviews, right? And so, unfortunately, there's no fee waivers or no assistance for going to interviews, hotel rooms for interviews, that kind of thing. Now, some of the stuff, if you read through all this material, you're going to see one of the things they talk about in terms of what you want to do, transitioning from undergraduate education, transitioning from there to med school, is start off with a balance of zero. Now, granted, you have a car payment, that kind of stuff, it's going to come into play, but try, if you haven't started saving money for interviews now, or yet, start doing it now. What you don't want to do is put all that stuff on a credit card and then have to be paying on that stuff while you're in med school as well. So you can start off with zero debt going into med school. Maybe you have some undergraduate student loans, and that's fine, but zero credit card debt, zero late payment penalties for whatever it may be, you're going to be much better off. So do start saving money now for med schools. How expensive is it, that interview process? How expensive could it get?
So it can be pretty expensive. I mean,
Right, it can be. Depends on how many interviews you have,
yeah,
right?
so a lot of it will depend on, there's a few things. I mean, getting if you've got your ducks in a row, if you perform well on the MCAT and things like that, then maybe you can feel better about it, go to fewer interviews. But Jason and I think I've gone to 7. Jason probably went to 6 or 7. And you think most plane tickets, unless you're close, and there's not a lot of schools that are that close. So I mean, you're probably looking to at least go Midwest or California, things like that, where plane tickets are $400 or $500 a pop. And hopefully you know someone you can stay with someone local, or if not, you're paying $85 for a hotel and then taxi rides and things like that. So it could, if you interview at 4 or 5 schools, it's going to be a few $1,000s likely. So, or more. And then you also got to think about, you probably want a new suit, or at least some of you may not have suits. So you'll have to invest in a suit and new shoes and things like that. And so there's more than just that cost. So it can add
You
up.
can wear the same thing to every interview, even girls. Wear the same thing twice. It's okay.
I want to say an outfit, but I mean, it may want to be, if you have holes in it, that may not be the best idea.
Don't wear.
Don't sleep in it the night before.
Yeah,
Right,
you
so do start saving up money now.
but, so it adds up.
All right, so from the med school standpoint, if you turn to page 4, that list, now granted all this is based on AAMC schools, but median debt is, in 2013 graduates, was $175,000. Now, that doesn't take into account total cost of attendance. If you look down a little bit, under the cost of med school M1 in-state 2013-2014, the median 4-year cost of attendance for the class of 2014 was $286,806. Now, what do they use to calculate cost of attendance? It's tuition and fees plus what else? Right, books, living expense, all kinds of things. And so usually when they calculate those numbers, it depends on exactly what the school reports, and that without digging into all the details and seeing for sure. But most times, cost of attendance is for one single individual, not a family. So if you have a family, if you're married, it's just going to increase that number even more.
But they won't loan you more than that.
The what?
I don't think graduate loans will give you more than a single person.
No, they won't. And so yeah, that's what when you're filling out your FAFSA, we'll mention that in a second too. Well, if you're married, filing jointly, even if you're filing separately, you have to put your spouse's stuff on there, all your kids' stuff, but your financial aid package is going to be based on just you, just for one person. So if you've got a family and a couple kids, that money is for you. That money's not for the kids, it's not for the spouse. And so things can be taught. Now, when you borrow money in the form of loans, how much do you want to take out? Everything they offer you, or just what you need? Right, just what you need. Now, some people will take everything out, but kind of a general rule of thumb. If you live like a physician while you're in med school, you're gonna live like a what? At least you're gonna live like a student, right, after you're done, become a physician. And so, so just take out what you need. And so, you know, hopefully if you are married, if you do have kids, you know, your wife or your spouse, or your, whatever, your spouse is going to work somewhere to supplement the income. All right, so it is expensive, but again, it's not anything super major to worry about. All right, and so that's cost of attendance, $286,806. If you look at the next page, on page 5, that's the osteopathic data. And so average 2012 indebtedness, so that's their latest data. If you look at all those values, they break it down by individual school. If you take the average of that, so for MD schools is $175,000. I didn't do the median, I just did average here. It's $201,995. So it is more expensive by about $25,000 to go to DO schools than it is MD schools. Why is that the case?
Because they don't have the state funding.
Right, most DO schools are private schools. And so private schools are always going to have to be a little bit higher because they're not supplemented by state money.
Another thing to worry about DO schools in the application process, if you get accepted to a DO school, usually the down payment is a lot more. And so if you're thinking of applying to both, you may want to think of scheduling your interviews after some of your MD interviews. That way you're not putting down, and maybe that's a bad, I don't know, you'd have to talk to some of the DOs. But I had a buddy who put down $1,500 on his first one and then interviewed on the second one. Had he got in, he would have chosen that one over it, and that was another $1,500. And then he was waiting to hear back from an MD school, and so had he got into the MD school, he would have lost $3,000. So you want to, that's another thing to remember about during the application process for DO schools. Plan for it.
All right, so most all this material, like I said, came from the AAMC site, and it's their first website. And so, you know, this next page, or page 6, is basically what is FIRST. So it stands for Financial Information, Resources, Services, and Tools for pre-med students, pre-med advisors, med students, residents, and information for you, you know, after you're all said and done. So there's a lot of financial stuff there. They really kind of go to the extreme to give you information and help you out. Now, the best thing you could probably do once you get accepted to med school, you get there, you actually get on campus, probably the best thing you can do is go visit the financial aid office at that school. Get to know the financial aid officers. And so they're the ones, you know, yeah, you can look up on the internet all day long if you have questions about things, but get to know the financial aid officers. They're going to kind of be your go-to people. And so especially if you, you know, you'll get awarded X number of dollars for financial aid, you'll accept X number of dollars for financial aid, but what if something happens? So you're married, you have children, what if one of your kids gets really, really sick, and you got a lot of out-of-pocket expense? Then what are you going to do? Now you go back to the only person who can help you is your financial aid people, advisors in the financial aid office. Go back, tell them what's going on, and usually they can work something out. Especially if you don't take all the money that they award you, then you got some playroom. Sometimes if you do take all that, the entire sum, sometimes there's not anything they can do, regardless of the circumstance. And so, you know, again, another reason why not to take it all out. All right, so you know, as far as the repayment aspect goes, you know, everybody worries about it. And again, it boils down to you're going to go to med school, you're going to be in debt, and then you're going to repay it. You're going to be fine. And so and you do have to plan ahead of time. Start planning now. Start saving up for interviews so that when you go to med school, your balance is zero. You don't have a huge credit card debt. You're going to have to budget, especially if you're not on your own, especially if you have a family. You're going to have to manage your debt. And so the current debt you have, plus, you know, continue to manage the car payments, continue to manage everything else. And then spend a lot of time educating yourself about repayment options. Now, that's not anything you need to do really right now. It's not anything you need to do probably during your first 3 or so years of med school. But do keep it in your mind. There's a lot of repayment options, and this material goes through some of those. You know, as far as page 8 goes, you know, again, it's kind of what I already talked about. Borrow only what you need. Don't borrow or take out the entire lump sum. And if possible, over there on the right-handed side, pay off your stuff before you start med school, if at all possible. Some people, it's not possible, but if you can, start at 0. And then, as you're going through med school, yes, you're getting loans. For most of those loans, interest is going to accrue from the day you get it all the way through the life of the loan until you pay the entire thing off. But you don't have to worry about the interest on the loans while you're going through med school. Yeah, it's nice if you can pay off the interest too while you're going through med school. Most of you probably aren't going to be able to do that. But pay down your debts that have the highest interest rates first. Most times those are going to be your credit cards. Get those out of the way. And so you're just going to have to manage. That's what it's going to boil down to. And so as far as you're on page 9, there are a few good points there as far as right in the center column about managing your financial aid disbursement. And so, you know, put your entire disbursement in a savings account. Why do they tell you to put it in a savings account? Right, because you gain interest. Now, granted, interest rates kind of suck, right? So you might get a couple dollars, but it's a couple more dollars than what you had, right? And then, you know, transfer money to yourself in regular increments as if you were receiving a paycheck. And so, you know, that goes back to managing money. It goes back to a budget. And so, you know, only take out each month what you need to basically live on. You know, you might, if you're renting a place, you know, if you went outright bought a house for med school, it's going to be a different story. But if you are renting a place, talk to whoever you're renting from and say, you know, I'm a med student, I get my financial aid disbursements on these dates. You know, can I pay my entire rent at one time and pay it off? It's one less thing you're going to have to worry about doing each month. And so, you know, if you pay it all in one time versus, you know, the bad thing about that is you say, well, all right, my rent's already paid off. I've still got this amount of money in that savings account. I can go out and have fun and blow it. But that's probably not what you want to do. You say, I don't have to save it, I don't have to pay any bills this month. But pay everything at one time. It's just one less thing you're going to have to worry about. Do keep in mind, when financial aid offices are pretty good, but there are problems that happen. But keep all your paperwork, keep track of how much you told them that you want, and make sure you get that amount. You don't want more than that. You for sure don't want less than that. But know how much each disbursement's going to be. Know when it's coming. Make sure on the day that it's supposed to be there, or the day it's supposed to be in your account, that it's actually there. You know, there are, just like an application process, people's stuff gets lost all the time, or paperwork gets mishandled. And so, you know, a lot of it's going to be up to you to manage the entire process. And don't forget your education tax incentives. Now, how many of you do your own taxes? All right, so one person. All right, how many of you are still claimed on your parents' income tax? If you don't do your own, you're probably claimed on your parents. All right, so don't forget your education tax incentives. Those are on there. It's a tax benefit. You get student loan interest deduction, and you get tuition and fees deduction, and you also get a lifetime learning tax credit. But you know, look down there at the bottom. You know, if you do your own, then you're going to have to remember all these things, and you can read up on the tax laws and use TurboTax and those kind of things. They'll go through and tell you that you can't do this or you can do this. But there's some things you can't double dip in. That's what no double dip benefit allow, little section down there at the bottom right hand corner is about. But you know, even if you're going through med school and you're still having your parents do your taxes, make sure they include the education stuff. Whether they're claiming you or whether they're doing them for you and you're claiming yourself. If you take it to somebody to prepare your taxes for you, they should know all that stuff. If they don't, take them with somebody else. All right, as far as the application process goes, do you have to submit the FAFSA just one time or every year? All right, every single year. When should you submit your FAFSA?
Except
Yesterday, later.
January. February,
When are-
yesterday, when your taxes are done.
When are taxes due each year?
April.
April 14th. If you wait till April 14th, it's probably too long. All right, so you have to have all of your W-2s and that kind of stuff by January the 31st. It doesn't take long to do your taxes. Most places you'll get everything before January 31st. As soon as your taxes are submitted and filed, fill out your FAFSA. Again, the earlier the better. If you wait too long, there could be deadlines you miss. And so the earlier the better, but you do have to do it every single year. When you fill it out, you're going to have to include your parents' info. Again, regardless if you are married, if you've been on your own for years, you're still going to have to include your parents' info. And so from a federal financial aid standpoint, you're considered independent. Even if your parents claim, you're still going to be considered independent. But for institutional financial aid, scholarships that come from the schools, talking about scholarships, we'll go off on a tangent here. What schools have more scholarship money available? MD schools or DO schools? We look at the data, it shows that DO schools, more students in DO schools get scholarships to attend than MD schools. So from a federal financial aid standpoint, you're considered independent. From an institutional financial aid standpoint, they're going to have your parents' income and your parents' info to see if you qualify. So that's a lot of times for scholarships, for institutional grants, that kind of stuff. And so make sure that you include. If you don't include your parents' stuff, unless they're deceased, if you don't include your parents' stuff, you're not going to qualify for any kind of institutional support. And so you'll do that. A lot of times the institutional stuff is money that you don't have to pay back. And so the more of that you can get, the happier you're going to be. All right, and so again, just kind of get in the mindset, even here, if you're on financial aid here, when you do your taxes, do your FAFSA at the same time. Just get into that groove. And so as far as, so you fill out the FAFSA, you submit it. Financial aid advisors sit down and they go through everything and they determine, based on all kinds of calculations, how much you qualify for. Again, family's not going to come into play. It's for you as an individual. And then you're going to have to decide on, do I want federal loans? Do I want private loans? Do I want a mixture of both? And so there are differences. And so page 12 goes through benefits of federal loans, benefits of private loans, a couple points of what to do before you sign your name on the dotted line. But there are differences. Some of the differences come down to what can be consolidated, what cannot be consolidated. Is it a fixed interest rate? Is it a variable interest rate? What is the interest rate is always a big thing. And so there's a lot of things to consider. And so, by far the majority of the students are going to be primarily on federal loans, and that's fine. Page 13, there are several different loan types. The most common is a Stafford loan. Now there are subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans, but for medical students and other grad students, you're only eligible for the unsubsidized loans. And what's the difference between a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan?
Interest rate.
Right, interest, basically interest accruing, right? And so they set the interest rate for the loans on July 1st each year. And so, if on July 2nd you're awarded a Stafford loan, you're going to have whatever interest rate they just set. Interest rate is going to stay the same for the life of the loan. It's not going to increase, it's not going to decrease. And so, you're going to get you have to do the FAFSA every year, you have to apply every year for financial aid. You're probably going to get one or multiple different Stafford loans each year, and so you will have multiple different loans, all with different interest rates. And so then it comes into, do you want to consolidate or not? And so, there's a consolidation page we'll get to in a second. But you always have to ask yourself that question. Now, federal loans can be consolidated. A lot of private loans, depending on which ones they are, and depending on the rules, you cannot consolidate them. Some of them can be consolidated in with your federal loans. Again, it's all kind of tricky because really all the federal loans now are operated by the federal government. So you got to deal with the bureaucracy of the government as well. And so there's a lot of politics still involved. But the most common is the unsubsidized Stafford loan. All right, so how much interest? So you're awarded X amount for your financial aid, your Stafford loan. By the time you're done, you're going to have more debt than just what you took out because of that interest. Probably on average, how much in interest is going to be added through your 4-year period. When you're all done, how much of that additional money, or what's interest contribute to the additional total cost of the loans you took out? It could be in upwards of $30,000, right? So just on the interest alone. So you think you're taking out, let's say for example, $100,000 total dollars, or say 150 by the time it's said and done, you really are 180 in debt. So the interest part, it does accrue, and the interest part's not fun. As far as kind of going back to the FAFSA, so you fill out your FAFSA, you get your award letter, which tells you this is how much you qualified for. And then on the award letter, you tell them how much of that you want dispersed to you. And so, right there in the center of that page, what to look for in an award letter. And so, take the package that's offered to you, compare that to any other packages. Compare that package, interest rate, everything else, to private loans. For sure, compare that to any kind of institutional support you get. The more loans with lower interest rates you can take out, the better you're going to be in the long run. So do the lowest interest rate loans first. And then also compare it to the total cost of attendance for that school. So every school is going to be different. You can find numbers on every single school. But then take into account what do you actually need in order to survive. And again, look at it, ideally, look at it from the standpoint of you as an individual. Not you and your kids and your spouse and everybody else. And so, again, hopefully they're going to be working to supplement that income. So there's a lot of sitting down, a lot of number crunching, a lot of things are going to have to come into play. Again, you don't just want to take out, say, well, I'm going to make this easy. I don't want to sit down and crunch numbers and take out every single cent that they offer you. Take out only what you need. All right, so you're going to spend 4 years going through and earning all of this debt that you're going to get. All right, so then you have to start repaying it. So on page 15, you got the little chart there, and it breaks it down by kind of different types of loans, different loan programs, and so there's a lot of stuff out there. You guys can look each one of those up now if you wanted to and see some of the details, some of the interest rates, that kind of stuff. But while you're in school, you don't have to pay anything. Now you can, and that's completely fine, but you don't have to. Now, anytime you pay, whether you're in school and you're paying on it, or you wait until you get out of school, the money that you pay, or that check you write each month, first goes to what part of the loan? First goes to the interest. All right, so you spend 4 years gaining interest as you go throughout the life of the loan. And so when you first start repaying, pretty much all your money, every check each month is going towards the interest. It's not really going toward, very, very little, if any at all, is going to go towards the principal balance. And so if you can at all, while you're in school, pay, if you have any extra money, pay on the interest for that loan. It'll help in the long run. All right, so you get down to school, you go into your internship, you go into your residency. And if you look on there, once you graduate school, generally for most loans you get a 6-month grace period. For some loans you get a 12-month grace period. And so that's when you don't have to pay. If you go into residency, depending on the loan type, residence, although you can defer your loans, you can go into a forbearance. Basically, it extends the time that you don't have to pay back the loan. Now, keep in mind, most of those deferments and most of those forbearances, you don't apply for just once. You don't just call the people who service your loan, which is going to be direct loans if you're doing it federally, and do it one time between your 4th year and the start of your residency. But you're going to have to do it every single year. You're going to have to get approved for a forbearance or a deferment every single year. As long as you're doing a residency and internship, you can do that. Now, as far as some of the repayment plans or options that you have, it's probably in your best interest to do one of the payment plans and pay on stuff as you're going through your residency. Don't just defer it and pay zero. Interest is still going to accrue. So if you're paying on something during your residency, then you're taking care of some of that interest. You're going to be taking care of some of the principal. Now, when you're done with your residency, then you start paying your loan. And that's what it says over here. Now, can you go into a deferment or forbearance after your residence and stop paying on a loan? Can you stop paying on a loan at any time? You can just not pay it, right? That's not what you want to do. It's going to cause all kinds of problems. But you can. If I don't see it happening with anyone that comes out of med school, but if you have some extenuating circumstance, say maybe you get in a car wreck and you just can't go to work. You can get them pushed off or have to pay. You can get it pushed off or deferred for a period of time. And so if something happens, you can't get it done. Otherwise, you're going to be paying on it after you get done with your residency. All right, so page 16 talks a little bit about consolidating your loans. All right, so again, you're going to have multiple loans that have different interest rates. And so if you don't, consolidating stuff is completely up to you. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into consolidating. And so one of the good things about it is it takes all of your different loans. They're all going to have their own different accounts. If you keep them all separate, you're going to have to write one check each month for each individual loan you have, so that can get time consuming and confusing. But consolidating will take everything and put it together, and you'll have one single payment. And so, for people that have subsidized and unsubsidized loans, then it's kind of two separate payments. But you guys only qualify for the unsubsidized. So it takes everything and puts it together. Now at the same time, it also takes a weighted average of your different interest rates. And so it takes the average and rounds it up to the nearest 1/8%. And so, in some ways, you're just going to have to calculate it and see, is that more beneficial? It probably is. Because you take lower interest rates, yeah, they're going to get moved up in average, but who knows what's going to happen on interest rates every year on July 1st. On July 1st, you may be at 5% interest rate. Next July 1st, your subsidized loans may be at 8%. And so then it goes back down to 5%. So it is variable each July, but then it's going to be fixed. And so you're going to basically take the weighted average.
So I noticed on here that there's extended repayment period up to 30 years.
Right.
I seem to remember talking to a doctor that said one time, he said, I barely paid my loans off. And he was like upper 50s, and he said, but I did that because I actually liked the tax benefits. Were the tax benefits what we were talking about before, is the interest that you...
Right, so when you'll get a stand, you start paying off loans, just like if you have a house, the mortgage interest that you pay, you get to write off on your taxes. If you have loans and you're paying it back, they'll send you a statement, the interest part of your loans that you paid off each month, you get to write that off. And so it is a pretty good tax break. But at the same time, do you want the tax break, or you want to pay it off in 10 years and be done and have the extra money to spend each month? And a lot of it's going to come down to family sitting down, budgeting, that kind of stuff. But consolidation, the other thing about consolidating your loans, that you always want to keep in mind, I'm not being pessimistic, but if you have loans from med school, so you can have loans from undergrad, your wife or your husband also has student loans. A lot of times people want to just take husbands and the wives and consolidate them together in one account. You can do that. But what's the problem with doing that?
Get divorced.
If you get divorced, again, I'm not being pessimistic, but if you get divorced, then who's responsible for the debt? Right, both of them, right? And so, so say, your case, you're going to med school, you're gonna have your $175,000 of debt. Say your wife had, say, $15,000 from undergraduate. You consolidate all that together. If you get divorced, then the wife's responsible for half of that, you're responsible for half of that. So in your interest, it's okay. In your spouse's interest, it's not. But I would not consolidate stuff. Together. So you do have to think about that. So you can't ever predict when that's going to happen. Page 17 goes through, kind of effects of loan consolidation. There's a lot of reading material there. You guys can read through. If you look down at number 3, the PSLF, PAYE, we'll talk about those in a second. But loans that were not originally dispersed from direct loans, which is basically the fancy word for the federal government, are not eligible for public service loan forgiveness or the pay-as-you-earn repayment program. And so those are not going to be forgiven unless you consolidate them in with, consolidate them through direct loans or through the federal government. Then they can fall into those repayment plans.
And this, I'm trying not to be pessimistic as well, but hypothetically, like certain people pass away in medical school, car accidents,
Right.
things like that. If you have private loans, they won't be forgiven and your spouse has to pay them off. But according to my understanding, federal government is more forgiving
They are. Yeah.
towards your spouse if you pass away during medical school, and they'll remove some or all
Right.
of that debt.
Yeah. He is right. Private loans, you're gonna have to pay back. Spouse is gonna have to pay back no matter what. Which if that could be bad, depending on if you got your 4th year last semester of med school, you've already got that $175,000 or more in debt. So, again, the financial aid aspect, that's get to know the financial aid advisors at the school. They're the absolute best people that you can get to. And so, again, being able to qualify for repayment plans, or have all your money, goes back to consolidation again. And so, a couple different things. Page 18 goes through, postponing it during residency. Again, that's going to be a choice that you make. Do I pay some? Do I qualify, or do I get into one of these repayment plans? When does my residency qualify for one of these repayment plans? 2, do I want to do that, or do I just want to defer it and not pay anything until I'm done with my residency? And we'll see, there's some charts in here that go through different numbers. Deferment eligibility chart on page 19. Again, for different types of loans, they have different requirements as to who does not qualify for deferment. And so, some of your options there. As far as loan repayment options, right? It's on page 20. And so, look at the, you can read through what each repayment option is, that kind of stuff, what are the eligibility requirements, what's the repayment terms. But the about your options part, where you start repaying part down at the bottom. And so you do want to select a plan that provides a manageable payment amount, but keep in mind lower isn't always better. And so the lower your payment, you might say, all right, well, the more money I have to spend, the better I can take care of my family, but at the same time, the longer you're going to be paying on those loans, and the more interest that's going to accrue on those loans. So again, it comes back to budgeting and managing issues. But do keep in mind, at any time you can change your repayment plan. All you have to do is contact the people who service your loan. In your case, it's going to be direct loans if it's federal. But you can change your repayment plan. You don't have to just sign up for one and say, all right, this is what I'm due for the next 50 years. You can always change it. And that'd be a wise thing to do. It's obviously in your residency, in my opinion, start off with a repayment plan. Start paying on it. But the payment you make each month during residency is going to be pretty low, right? But at least you're paying something. Now, when you get out and you're making more money, change your repayment plan. and start paying more money. Just like with any kind of bill, just because you don't get a statement in the mail, does that mean that you don't have to pay it? Right, and so keep that in mind, especially with student loans. All right, so a couple of repayment options, starting on page 21. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. All of these different loan programs, or the forgiveness programs, you can only do those if your loans are not in default. So if a loan's in default, what'd you do? Or not do? Right, you didn't pay, right? So if you have any kind of outstanding balance that you didn't pay, you're not ever going to qualify for a loan forgiveness program. So again, make sure you budget, make sure you pay each and every month, whether you receive a statement or not. A lot of times, if you repay stuff back, if you sign up for automatic withdrawal, a lot of times what would they do as an incentive to sign up for the automatic withdrawal?
Lower the interest.
Lower your interest rate by 1/4% or something like that, which doesn't sound like much, but in the long run, say over 20 years, it's going to add up. So any of those little things you can do, the better. All right, so for this one, yeah, you have to qualify, be in a qualifying public service job. Look at the little gray box down there in the bottom right-handed side. Really think about this one in terms of your residency. Does the residency you're going into qualify as or will it qualify for you to be able to participate in this public service loan forgiveness program? And that might be something to ask during your residency interviews and help you decide where you want to go. All right, so basically with this one, after you make 120, if you do qualify, after you make 120 successive payments, they'll forgive whatever the remaining balance is. Now, 120 consecutive payments is how many years? 10 years, right? And so if you pay every month for 10 years, then they'll forgive everything else. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these, there are no prepayment penalties. So you can pay more each month, you can pay a lump sum each month. If you do that, then if you start looking at your statement, say you paid $20,000 this month and it went towards your loan, the next time you get your statement, it's going to say that you're prepaid until whatever it adds up to be, maybe 3 or 4 years from now. And that means you don't technically have to pay each month after that. Depending on how you consolidate it, it may or may not still accrue interest in that time. A lot of them don't, so you're just kind of off free. But again, it's a $20,000 wad of cash that you just gave them, you don't have. But if you prepay, it doesn't qualify. And so if you prepay, it doesn't count into that 120 months. So you're going to have to make a payment every single month. And so prepayment doesn't apply for that 120 qualifying successive monthly payment rule. Page 22 is another repayment option. So this one's either through the Public Health Service Commission Corps, civil service programs, or military programs. And so I know we've had the military guy come in and talk. He's calling Susan again, wanting to come in and talk at some point in time, or at least come by campus. And so, keep in mind, I know Christian knows a lot about this. You can go to the websites there for the Army, Navy, the Air Force, and keep in mind the programs are essentially the same. The number of positions they take, the number of scholarships they have is going to be different among all the different service divisions. And so, but you can get your loans paid off that way too. Income-based repayment is basically either going to set your loan payments or cap your loan payments at 15% of your household income that exceeds 150% of the federal poverty guideline based on your family size. I know all that stuff's confusing. They give you a little example over here. But usually during your residency, most of them are going to pay stuff, and they're going to pay it either based on the income-based repayment plan, or on page 24, paid on the pay-as-you-earn repayment plan. The income-based is capped at 15%, pay-as-you-earn is capped at 10%, so it's going to be a little bit less. But at least you're paying something. If you look at the values there, $274 versus $411, it's not that much different. So, but at least you're paying something. So those are the two to think about, especially in terms of residency. Now, on page 25 and 26, there's 74 programs out there that are loan repayment or loan forgiveness or scholarship programs. Now, some of them are federal, some of them are a combination of federal and state programs, and a lot of them are state-specific programs. Now, if you're wanting to go out and go to med school and come back to Utah and you want to get into one of these programs, sorry, Utah does not have a program. So list the states on there. You have to be practicing in that state. Again, you pull this website up, you can click on them, pulls up all the information, all the qualifying information, all the details. But do realize, not every single one of you are going to come back to Utah, so you're going to be elsewhere. If you are in one of these states, look up their loan forgiveness programs. These 74 are as of this week. There's new ones all the time. Some of these disappear all the time. It really all depends on budget issues at the state and the federal level.
Are these primarily for family practice, or?
Some are, some aren't. Yeah, some are family practice, some are rural areas, some are Indian reservations. And so, it's just get on sometime, click through, look at the details, and see what all there is. Page 27 through, really page 29. Look at those. Look at those on your own. It's kind of, repayment plans based on, income-based repayment, pay-as-you-earn repayment, standard repayment. Gives you some values there. All the little fine print at the bottom tells you, the amount of loan they're basing that on. And so it could vary. But you see some pretty big numbers in there. At the same time, if you decrease the payment, it's going to extend the time you're paying, which is also going to extend the interest in the overall cost of the loan. Starting on page 30 through the end is just some very general basic info. Those of you that are doing your own taxes and managing your own income, you know all that stuff already. Those of you that aren't, look at it and start thinking about that now. The big one you want to think about is your credit. All right, so you can't do anything without good credit. How do you get good credit?
Get a credit card.
Right, you have to spend money, right? Now, how much money? How many of you have Netflix subscriptions? Well, how do you pay for that?
Credit card.
Right, so one of the best ways to start getting credit, get a credit card. Even if you have no credit right now, there's still a credit card out there you can qualify for. Get a credit card with a low limit, put just your Netflix payment each month, or $8.54 or whatever it is, on that credit card each month to pay it off. You're paying it anyway, but put it on the credit card. That's going on your credit report. If you pay it out of your bank account to Netflix, your credit report's never even going to show that. But put it on a credit card, pay it each month. They don't care how much you're paying necessarily. It's just that you have a record of establishing proper payment. So start on that now. Now, if you're doing that as a credit card with your mom or dad's name on it, you're kind of a cosigner, an authorized user, that's not going to help you out. Get out, get on your own, get a little credit card, put your Netflix subscription on there, and pay your $8 each month. And that by itself will go a long way. But there's a lot of things that come into play as far as credit. So, but that's a beginning. That will help. So again, just some general type stuff in there. They do provide you with a good budget sheet on page 39, especially for if you have a family, taking into account money you're getting from your financial aid disbursement plus money from your spouse working. But go through it. So again, it's going to be about budget. Nobody likes to sit down and talk the budget stuff. Always raises controversy in some cases, but it's something you're going to have to get used to, and something that you're absolutely going to have to do. But again, some general information. Again, you can find all this stuff online on the first website. There's even more than this, but this is kind of the basics, at least things to start thinking about. But again, for sure, some of you are more out from applying, but keep the fee assistance programs in mind. Anybody else in here besides Jason take advantage of that.
I applied, but I didn't get it.
You did, right? Didn't you?
I applied, but I didn't qualify for it.
Didn't you, Jason?
The, what's it called?
The fee assistance program?
Yeah, no, yeah, my parents' income was barely underneath the limit, so.
Yeah.
I think John's, like, his parents made like $200 more, and so he didn't qualify or something.
Yeah.
They're pretty strict on the amount.
Yeah, no, there was one, I know one student whose parents made $3 more than their
Oh, my
own.
goodness.
So, it is strict, but you're not gonna get, right, you're not gonna get money if you don't apply. Look for scholarships, look for that kind of stuff, apply for them. All they can do is tell you no, but they can't tell you yes unless you apply for those, you inquire about those. The more free money you get, the better. Yeah.
Are you aware of anyone declaring bankruptcy? I'm just, that's like a loophole I'm almost considering, not saying like we're really gonna do it, but just, let's just say hypothetically, you can take all that debt and then you just declare bankruptcy,
Well,
and you start off with like a
well, you
record, right?
can't do that, right? So if you declare bankruptcy, if you have any kind of outstanding loans, you still have to pay those back. They're not erased.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Especially, yeah, federal loans, private loans even, for sure as
So
well.
they'll get after you.
So yeah, they'll get rid of your debt except for your student loan debt. You still gotta pay that back.
Okay. Never
So
mind.
yeah, don't declare bankruptcy.
So what if we pay off our student loans with our credit card and then,
Well, what's your interest rate's gonna be higher on what?
credit, then you
But if you pay it
So
off.
take out all
Yeah,
private
so
loans,
no-
declare
So,
bankruptcy.
you know, also when you look at your credit report, you guys are gonna build credit as you go throughout med school. Some of you probably have 0 credit right now, or very bad. But, you know, it'll get better. And, you know, student loans, when they're looking at that as credit, yeah, it comes through as an expense, but as long as you don't default, as long as you pay every month, it's looked at as good credit. You know, they don't look at student loan debt. They do, but it's not a huge part in calculating how much money you qualify for to buy a house, or how much money you qualify for to buy a car. As long as you don't default on it. If you default on it, then it's even worse than defaulting on a credit card payment. So don't default on your loans. Keep all the repayment plans in mind. Budget, plan, manage, and you guys will be fine. Start now. Start saving money for interviews now so that you don't start med school with a bunch of credit card debt to pay off. Yeah, you'd much rather use your money to pay, your financial aid money to pay for something else rather than pay for your credit card debt. So yeah, start saving now for interviews. Questions? So again, I'm not a financial advisor, but some things I told you through personal experience. Yeah.
the other nice thing is you're gonna hear this over and over again in every interview you get
Yeah.
to. So if you don't remember everything, they're gonna tell it to you until you don't hear it. So
Yeah.
don't feel like it's over your head yet, 'cause
Yeah, you'll hear it all the time. Best thing you do now, you know, if you're a year or so out from applying, is just save money, reduce your debt. So when you start med school, you're at 0. If you're married, it might be kind of impossible. If you have kids, that might be kind of impossible. But do the best you can. Questions? You sure?
I call you in 4
Pretty
years.
thorough. Can you call me what?
Call you in 4 years.